Howdy, of you delicious people. So, I just went on Netflix and I was just kind of like, okay, like I was just trying to figure out something to watch. And so I just kind of scrolled through to just kind of see what is the new thing on there. And so, like, I just fell into watching this film, Level 16. And I was just kind of like, okay, this movie is kind of interesting. I think I've seen movies ballparkingly similar to this. Like I'd seen the Colin Farrell movie Voyagers, and then when I was to go and watch this film, I can't help but like think that there was some kind of similarities to what was going on there via this movie and that one. But eventually, like this movie goes into a much more darker turn than Voyagers really does. But so for people that don't know what this movie is, maybe saw this and they're like, "What the heck is Level 16?" There was a part of me that kind of felt that this movie felt similar to uh, like kind of what was to be of Black Widow from Marvel Age of Ultron, where we were to have a ton of group of women all be told like how to act and how to do anything, and if they stepped out of line in one fell sneeze, like someone was to go and grab them and to discipline them. And so everything is about these women bizarrely needing to be clean, and it seems like they are to be told the same kind of speech over and over and over again, just kind of the same thing kind of drilled into their heads. Like they're to be happy about movie night, but movie night is to have the same kinds of films just being displayed over and over and over again until the women all memorize the lines, but they're always happy to see these movies for whatever reason. So going into this film, like I would say that this movie is just okay. Like if you have some time to kill, go into Level 16. But like I really didn't really understand what is to go on until like they really just had to like tell you what is going on towards the very end. And then you're like, oh, okay. Like it just felt like kind of an odd film were to where you're eventually to find just all these women that are to be forced in this thing that the women themselves call this school, but aren't really being schooled really all that well. And really they are to just be supposedly to be sold off to some couple or some rich people, and you naturally assume that they're to be sold off to people to get adopted because that's the story that they are to supposedly have been fed, that they are to be supposed to like worked up to this level or levels to eventually get adopted by these families. But we eventually end up finding out that there is some ulterior alternative motive going on here, let's just say. So that way I can get these words out. So I was just kind of like, okay, like what is really going on in this movie? Like you have like these kids being fed drugs, and then sometimes they are to be fed these new drugs, and they're like, hey, blue drug today, yay! Like, because like these girls must have nothing to be really excited about. They can't even tell the difference between what is day and what is night. Like they don't have any windows in this environment, and it becomes very difficult for eventually for them to want to escape towards the end of this movie. It seems like you have to get certain kind of key code card things to eventually get out of this facility. So like there's a lot of interesting things going on here, but really like there's a long stretch of eventually finally figuring out what the heck is really going on in this movie. And there's not enough exciting things really going on in this film to 100% keep a person's interest, but like maybe there's something there that maybe someone just was like, okay, like I just wanted to just see what this movie was, and he told me what it was. Thank God for that, because maybe I won't see this movie now, or maybe I will, because like this just seemed weird enough. So I think I'm going to just tell you the most important thing about this film at the very beginning of the spoiler part. So that way, if people want to hear what the big spoiler part is at the end of this movie, they can now just say, okay, well, I know what the most important thing of this movie is to be. And so now I'm willing to sit X amount of minutes till we get there. That's really what this movie is. Like, it kind of feels like an escape story that is to slowly but surely happen within this time period. So, with that said, let's go into that coveted double five time territory because it is that time again of spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. And I have to scratch my ear because figures that the one ear that is, or the one hand that is holding the thing, I'm like, I have to itch there now. So what is the big thing about this movie? So we find out that every single one of these girls are to be groomed to eventually be of a certain age, to have their skin being placed on an older woman to make this older woman look much more youthful. That's what this movie is all about. Putting young skin on older people. Having this couple just like we have this woman just kind of randomly choosing. It's like, just that one. Who cares? Because it doesn't matter. And I don't think that this one really wanted to be a part of this real procedure, but she just decided to. So, and eventually these girls are to get killed off after that point of people getting chosen. So, and there's a whole build up to that where these girls are kind of just being fed this certain kind of life where they're to be just adopted from families that would happily give these girls up at a young age so they could be primed to be manipulated and brainwashed and then put through the system to think that eventually they're to be picked to eventually go to the perfect family, but instead their head is to be just sliced upon open to be fed to some older woman to make her look younger. Weirdly enough. So let's get into all the little bits and pieces of this. So eventually these women are to be every day fed these drugs, and so I guess these drugs were to keep them obedient, and so we start to have Sophie no longer take these drugs to clear her head. And so eventually Sophie is to eventually tell Vivian to stop taking the drugs also, and especially do not take the blue drug. So all of a sudden Vivian starts not taking this drug, and we also find out that Vivian is to, out of everybody, not be like absolutely clean compared to everyone else. Because I guess these people are to thrive on clean girls. Because we have this very beginning of this movie where everybody's to rush off to make it to this sink, and they all have to be in perfectly lined order. And so one girl is to rush to this sink and to like clean her face and clean her hands, like, hey, look at me, I'm clean. And so like people are just like, okay, go about your business. The next girl is to be late at getting her face cleaned because there's to be some other girl who can't find her washcloth because I guess she is to be, I guess, supposedly blind. So this girl gets out of line, helps this other girl, and then regrets it because she used to kind of quickly clean her face, like, hey guys, clean. But there's to be guards that end up punishing her because she wasn't there at the perfect time that she was supposed to be cleaned. So she ended up getting disciplined, even though she cleaned her face, cleaned her hands like they asked. No, like she didn't get there before the buzzer, I guess. So she just got like freaking punished for that. So like that's to tell how weird these people are, that if you don't do specific things in specific times, and like we have them all, like this whole class of a thing, go to this video where this woman is to mention them about cleanliness is next to godliness kind of thing, and like, and you all have to be like the perfect woman and this and that, and just like really just kind of brainwashing these women. And so they basically, every time this girl is to mention something, they are to repeat it. So like talking about femininity and all kinds of things, like you need to uh like be all prim and proper and whatever. So eventually these girls are to repeat this thing, to brainwash this thing, but eventually the video all of a sudden goes like kind of cattywampus, or just starts to go into a static way of doing things. And like some of the girls are like, well, should we say anything? Should we step out of the class to eventually tell someone? And they're like, no, do not go out and tell anybody or you'll get punished. Like, don't, like, we'll just watch this video. Like, they've probably seen this video hundreds upon hundreds of times, so it doesn't matter what it is, anyways. They probably didn't learn anything new. So, like, that they probably hadn't been drilled into their head seemingly 1,000 times. So we get where like supposedly these girls are to come in and establish dominance, and to say that they're going to be the head girl of whatever this level 16 is. And so there is just kind of just like, okay, well, I guess she's the new B in town, the new bit in town. But like, freaking hey, like everybody has to come in here and just be like, hey man, like I'm gonna be the leader of this whole thing, and nobody sneezes unless I say so, kind of thing. So don't be sneezing anytime soon. So so we go along, and eventually these girls are to be like fed this medication, that they're to be told like over and over again that this medication is to make them healthy. The medication is to fight off disease, and like go ahead and take this medication. And so they end up taking this blue medication that completely knocks them out. And so a couple is to go in and just kind of randomly pick some girl. And so this, and so Sophie is to tell Vivian to not take this pill, so that way she can understand what they're doing here. So this couple is to pick this girl, and immediately Vivian is thinking like, oh, so she's going to be choose to be in a family, and good for her. And it's like, well, we're so to have thought. So eventually we have Miss Brixel, who is talking to Dr. Morrow, and is talking that soon that they should probably just stop doing this. That eventually they're starting to run out of resources, and eventually they're starting to run out of funds to put this whole thing together. And Dr. Morrow's like, no, I think we still got some really good time with us, like still to be doing this. So like, let's keep on doing this. So because Miss Brixel is just kind of like, I want to be out. Like, I want to be done with this. Like, I think, like, because, like, she is to come in there and be this, like, stickler, but then eventually she's just kind of like, you know what, I think I just want to be done with this. Like, I think that this is, like, the last, like, I think I want to just get out of here. I think I want to escape. By the end of this movie, we really find out that this girl really wanted to escape. But this girl is to also be the Punisher as well as anyone else is. To eventually take Vivian and put her into a cell and tell her it's like, hey, like you might be in here till forever, till graduation, or for however long we deem you to be in here in this little like cell of a thing, uh, to eventually have her like learn her manners or learn to be uh, much more compliant or whatever. So because we have a moment before this where Vivian was to talk to Dr. Morrow, because Dr. Morrow was to give everybody a vaccine because evidently there is to be a fever that is starting to break out. So Vivian is to say, "Oh, Dr. Morrow, like, hey, you're the guy that's doing the that did the whole like speaker thing. We just thought you were just some speaker person. We didn't think you were actually person." So he was like, "Yeah," and so Vivian is to eventually mention that they are to get these like bed like tags, probably from taking so much drugs or taking any number of things. And so Dr. Morrow, I think, gives her some like peroxide to help with the healing and just be like, okay, well, I'm assuming like if any girls are probably get this, like then like we'll just be able to take care of that easily. And so Vivian is to mention like, hey, who was I named after? And Dr. Morrow is like, yeah, like there was an actually actress that was called Vivian Lee, and that's who you were named after. So Vivian is to eventually go out of her way to go back into Dr. Morrow's office and ask, uh, like Dr. Morrow some questions that really aren't all that important. And so Dr. Morrow is just like, okay, this seems weird that you're asking me this. Do you really feel like this is really an important thing that you should be asking me? Um, because Vivian asks him again about the whole actress thing. And Dr. Morrow's like, oh, yeah, like that actress, like she was in these movies and that movies. And I wanted to give you guys like Gone with the Wind, but Miss Brixel like didn't want that to happen. And so Vivian is like, "Oh, Dr. Morrow, you pick up the movies?" And he's like, "Yeah, like I would have really wanted to give you guys more like choices, but like there was just such a limited thing of what I could really choose." Because Vivian is like, "Well, yeah, like it's starting to get to where like some of the girls they just know these movies by heart. They knew every single word. You can see like four or five people like mouthing every word of the movie while they're to be like watching it. So Vivian is like, well, hey, hopefully we can get some kind of variety of kind of movies soon. Dr. Morrow's like, well, we'll see about that. So Vivian goes on, and so eventually we are to find that also it seems that one of the like I guess the orderlies of this whole thing is to starting to do inappropriate things, I guess, with some of the girls, but probably when they're drugged or whichever. So that is to eventually lead to having that this guy, when everyone is to be supposedly asleep, we eventually have a girl attack this orderly and take him down. And so, because these girls are going to try and get this key card of a thing, they want to desperately try to find that so that way they think that they can escape. So we have Sophia who is to take this card and run off with it. And so, and this is when Vivian is now in that like that little cell, that little box. And so Miss Brixel is to go and have everybody come into this one room. And so Dr. Morrow is to tell all the girls, it's like, hey, like this one girl had taken stuff, this card from us. And so now, like, you guys need to confess where it is. You guys need to tell us where it is. And because Dr. Morrow's play, it's like, hey, like, I gave you food, like, I gave you shelter, like, I gave you a life, and, like, and you're gonna betray me like this? You're not gonna, like, go and, like, finger point where this person is? Like, that kind of seems like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you, like, not helping me? Because I've saved your guys' life in some way or what another. So, which is not really true. This guy was just buttering these girls up until a certain point in time where it's like, okay, scalpel, slice and dice to get rid of these bodies and dump them somewhere. So, and I'm assuming they're probably going to sell their organs probably in the black market or some crap. So eventually this is to lead to eventually Vivian finding this key card, and eventually she ends up getting back with Sophia, and like eventually they start freeing people and telling them to all like, hey guys, let's all meet in this room because we're gonna all tell you the truth, because eventually these girls are to find out that there is to be some girl laying around in this one room where her face is off, like Nicolas Cage, John Travolta style, and like she is to basically be dead. So Vivian is to like continue to go through this place and also talk to Miss Brixel, and Brixel is like, you know what, I want to get the heck out of here. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so Vivian is to go to this video that she is to find where Dr. Morrow is to explain this whole process. That this whole procedure is to eventually take a skin of the youth to replace it upon a older skin to make a older woman look much younger. And so Vivian is to find that out. It's like, oh, so we were just like, we're basically just sheep to them. We're basically just like eventually at some point to be fattened up for them to come in and de-skin us, for them to be able to use for a younger woman, or to make an old woman look younger. Like, this is awful. So eventually the girls are to explain this to all the other girls, and we have, I'm gonna gear up here for a second. So these girls go and pull all these other girls, wake them up, and all kinds of things to let them know what all is going on. Because some girls don't know what day and night and whatever is, because how could they? Because no windows. So these girls explain to them what's going on. They bring in Miss Brixel to confirm all this. And they end up also finding out that Miss Brixel herself was also a client of Dr. Murrow's. I guess to just be like, hey man, like you can get this whole procedure for free if you're now going to be a part of this thing. What I'm naturally assuming. So what these girls decide to do is go up onto the roof of this facility and go on to try and escape this place, which winds up with the orderlies trying to prevent them from escaping. And so the girls have to try to attack some of these orderlies and take them down. And so one of the orderlies is tossed off the roof. So these girls are scrambling outside of this building, and they're like, oh my god, like the air is clear out here. And because they were kind of fed these lies to be told that the air probably wasn't good enough for them out there, hence why there was no windows. Like, they were told a bunch of lies, and they were told a bunch of things to keep them in there. And when they finally go outside, they're just like, hey, this seems to be perfectly fine. We were lied to the whole entire time. So they're scrambling out of this building, I think using the fire escape to get the heck out of there. And so these girls are all like just scrambling all over the place. So eventually Dr. Murrow is to try and go and find with two other men trying to find these women. And so they end up finding both Sophia and Vivian because they're the real actors of all this, and everyone else is just kind of extras. So Dr. Murrow is to try to get to Vivian and Sophia, who have kind of locked themselves into this one small little room. And bizarrely, there is to be this big wood piece to just really close this door perfectly and well and whatever. And I'm just like, man, what a convenient thing that is, right? So we have Dr. Murrow talking to Vivian uh, through this barred window. What a coincidence that is! Also, just like, well, they couldn't have broke through this window because there's bars there. So Vivian is to really and truly talk to Dr. Murrow and mention it's like, you only wanted me here for my skin, for my youthful skin. And Dr. Murrow's like, yeah, like, I spent 16 years of my life to like perfect what you see here, what you look into the mirror every day. Like, I had to spend 16 years of my life trying to make you a viable thing. And so Vivian is to have a scalpel, and she's like, oh, so I'm just going to ruin now what you have spent 16 years trying to perfect. So she ends up just kind of scarring her face up. Obviously, you can, like, she's slicing up her face uh, to not such an extreme measure where she's like bleeding out or whatever, but like she's a scar up her face. And so, and like Sophia, the other girl, is to be injured. So Dr. Moore was like, "Do you think that we can just kind of like just figure out a way to just like burrow a way through this door?" And the two other guys that he's with are just like, "You know what? I think we need to just go and like send you to our boss and have him deal with you." Cause like all these girls have gotten loose, like all this is getting out of your control, and that's your fault. So time for you to go. So eventually we are to hear gunshots going off in the distance, naturally assuming that Dr. Murrow is to be killed off. So I'm assuming a lot of these girls randomly found like the police of wherever this is. And surprisingly, these police officers had found these two girls, I guess, seemingly days later. And so, like, the cops are kind of questioning these girls or checking on them. Vivian has mentioned that her other friend is to get injured, and really we just end this movie with this police officer just kind of taking them and kind of going and having them being helped with whatever they need, kind of transitioning them off to wherever they need to go next. So yeah, that's the real, true, legitimate ending of this movie, and I hope I kind of covered everything. But there's also not a lot in this movie, in all honesty, because we had the one moment where Vivian, after she was to get off her medication and stop taking them, how eventually she started to just feel like groggy and was like, "Whoa," like she couldn't really see all that well, and so there was this one part where Miss Breixel was trying to drug everybody to make sure that everyone was taking their medication, and Vivian was to try to not fall asleep, and that's when she was trying to desperately try and find where the other girl was hiding the key card, and eventually I believe she ends up finding what she was looking for. She's tearing through pillows and trying to find mattress and everything to find where this card is. But yeah, so really, I think that's all that I could say about this film, and I kind of feel like I'm not getting enough of what I should put out today. But like, there is projects that happened, there are things that eventually also got in the way of doing what I would normally try to do. So this just came out. So I apologize, but otherwise, I think it's also that time again to call it a day. Overall, this movie is just a very slow moving film until the end where it's like, aha, that's what they were doing. But after that, it was just kind of like okay, like a little bit too much information, way too late. And I think that's really what this movie really is a little bit of information, way too late. And like if they would have been teasing about this to where we'd have like this duo side of things, where these girls wouldn't have like we the audience would have been knowing what was really going on, but these girls were oblivious of it. That would have been an interesting story to have this kind of build up of us just investing in these girls early to have us find out that oh my god, these girls are going to get like freaking their face like Nicolas Cage, John Travolta faced off. Like they would have built that up in the very beginning, and then eventually had us kind of like just being horrified when eventually there's going to be a moment where some girl is to get picked to eventually get her face picked off. Like I think that would have been a much more interesting movie to like get us like whoa about instead of eventually just dropping what is to actually happen towards the end. It just there was not enough excitement or there was not enough interesting things built up into this film. Um, it just felt like of a lot of other things where eventually people are to be stuck somewhere until we eventually find out what they're to be actually used for. So that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, buddy. Bye, buddy.